actually part of that, I do touch on the prodrome because, of course, comorbidities, as my team and others are finding, are more common, or morbidities, if you like to say, morbidities are more common in the MS population during this prodromal phase relative to matched general population controls. So I think the real take home there is that these comorbidities, they are more common in the MS population, and they are more common even before classical MS onset. So I think that's really important. NMOSD, we know a lot less. We don't even know if those individuals have a prodrome, and a lot less is known about the prevalence of comorbidities in the NMOSD population. But in short, just more broadly thinking about comorbidities in MS and NMOSD, they do appear more common in both diseases. Obviously, we know a lot more in multiple sclerosis. In fact, the literature has been rapidly rising over the last few years. I think in the last year, on PubMed alone, if you just put in a quick search for MS and comorbidity, over 400 articles were published in the last year. And for NMOSD, that was around 40. So we know a lot more in MS. There are a huge range of comorbidities that are more common in the MS population. Some of the most prevalent comorbidities are things like anxiety and depression, hyperlipidemia, and chronic lung disease. For NMOSD, a lot less is known, but a very nice series of articles and papers have been published just this year, come out of South Korea, work that I've not been involved with, but they've been specifically focusing on individual comorbidities and observed that comorbidities such as Parkinson's disease and ischemic heart disease are more common in the NMOSD population relative to matched general population controls. It was nice because they were also able to compare the NMOSD population with the MS population. It looks like the risk of the comorbidities they looked at are fairly similar between the two. So they're both more common in NMOSD and in the MS population relative to their matched general population controls. And then, of course, the so what question is, what relevance do comorbidities have? There's, again, a real interesting and exciting emerging literature on this. My team, for instance, have been involved with looking at the association between comorbidities and risk of future relapse in the MS population, and comorbidities and risk of future disability progression. So again, I'm afraid we don't know anything in the NMOSD population on those topics, but in short, we can find a general effect essentially as an individual accrues more comorbidities, then their risk of future relapse increases. As they accrue more comorbidities, their risk of future disability progression increases. And then we find specific effects. So things like migraine are associated with increased risk of future relapses. Mental health, so anxiety and depression, are associated with increased risk of future disability progression, among others. So very intriguing, I find interesting work. Of course, what we'd like to know next is that if you could alter the course of that comorbidity, so if you could effectively manage that comorbidity, could you positively benefit that person with MS in the future? Could you reduce their relapse risk or modify their relapse risk? Could you modify their disability progression? And that we don't know at present. But that would be really exciting and a potential avenue for future research.